Some people go missing and are never seen again. Others disappear, but their voices never leave. What happens when someone vanishes without a trace, yet their voice keeps calling, whispering, and crying out for help? Tonight, we tell the story of Daniel Carter, a man who vanished mysteriously, only for his voice to keep haunting those he left behind. Are you ready for the truth? Or will his voice find you too? Daniel Carter was an ordinary man living in a small town in Washington. He had a job, a family, and a routine like everyone else. But on November 6, 2019, he vanished. 1 minute, he was walking home from work. The next, he was gone. No calls, no texts, no signs of struggle. He had simply disappeared into thin air. The police searched everywhere. His family, desperate for answers, called his phone over and over. It went straight to voicemail. But then something strange happened. 2 days after Daniel went missing, his wife, Lisa, received a call from his number. Her heart raced. Hands shaking, she picked up. "Daniel?" Silence. Then, a whisper. "Lisa, help me." The call ended. The number was disconnected. Daniel had been missing for 48 hours. But somehow his voice was still calling. The calls continued. Lisa received them at random times. 2:47 a.m., 4:13 p.m., 11:30 p.m. Every time it was Daniel's voice, begging for help. But no one could trace the calls. Police checked the phone records. They said the calls were impossible. Daniel's phone had been deactivated after he went missing. Yet, the calls kept coming. Lisa wasn't the only one who heard him. Daniel's coworkers reported hearing his voice on the office intercom. Even though he wasn't there, neighbors claimed they heard him talking in his backyard at night. But when they looked, no one was there. It was like Daniel was still here, but unseen. And then things got worse. Lisa sat alone in the living room, staring at the blank TV screen. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second stretching longer than the last. Sleep had become a stranger to her. Ever since Daniel's disappearance, her nights were spent waiting. Waiting for another phone call. Waiting for another whisper. Waiting for a sign that he was still out there. She hadn't left the house in days. Every time she stepped outside, it felt like she was leaving him behind. Tonight was no different. The house was silent, but it felt too silent. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. And then she heard it. A muffled voice. Lisa sat up, her entire body going rigid. It was faint, but undeniable. It was coming from inside the walls. She held her breath, trying to convince herself that it was just her imagination. But then she heard it again. "Lisa, I'm here." Her stomach dropped. The voice was right behind the wall. Her first instinct was to run. But she didn't, because it was Daniel's voice. She stepped forward, pressing her ear to the wall. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She whispered, "Daniel?" Silence. Then scratching. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across wood. Lisa's breath came in shallow gasps. She backed away, her mind racing. Had Daniel been buried inside the walls? No. That was crazy. But the sound, the voice, it was too real. Tears welled in her eyes. "Daniel, if you can hear me, say something." Silence. Then, something slammed against the wall. Hard. Lisa screamed, stumbling backward. The whole house seemed to shake. And then nothing. The air was thick and heavy. She could still feel something behind that wall. Something watching. Lisa ran to the garage. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the heaviest hammer she could find. She was done being afraid. If Daniel was in there, if there was even the slightest chance, she had to find him. She marched back inside, raising the hammer high. Then, with a deep breath, she swung. The first hit sent plaster flying. She swung again. And again. The hole grew wider. Dust filled the air. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. One more swing. The wall collapsed inward. Lisa dropped the hammer. She staggered back. The space behind the wall wasn't empty. It was a hidden room. Small. Dark. The walls were covered in scratches. Long, jagged marks, as if someone had been trapped inside, clawing to get out. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. Something was in here. Or had been. Her phone buzzed. Unknown caller. Her body went cold. Hands shaking, she pressed answer. Lisa? It was Daniel's voice. But it sounded wrong. Glitching. Distant. Like he was calling from underwater. Why did you stop looking for me? Her heart stopped. Her mouth went dry. Daniel. Silence. Then, a slow exhale. Like someone was breathing directly into the speaker. The air around her grew freezing. Lisa turned back to the hole in the wall. And that's when she saw it. In the darkness of the hidden room, a shadow moved. Not Daniel. Something else. Watching. Waiting. Lisa dropped her phone. The call ended. And from the darkness, a voice whispered, "Found you." Lisa sat at her dining table, staring at the stack of missing person reports in front of her. Pages covered in faded ink, old photographs of people long forgotten. Each one had vanished without a trace. She had been up all night, sifting through every police record, newspaper article, and online forum post she could find. And then she saw it. A case file from 1983. A man named Michael Hayes had disappeared on the exact same street Daniel had. Same eerie circumstances. Same lack of evidence. Even more terrifying? Before he was declared dead, his wife had received phone calls. Phone calls, just like Lisa had been getting. Her breath caught in her throat. Her pulse thundered in her ears. This wasn't just a coincidence. Something was happening here, something no one else saw. Lisa grabbed her phone and dialed the police station. Detective Harris picked up on the second ring. His voice was tired. "Lisa, you need to stop calling us about this." Her grip tightened around the phone. "No, you need to listen to me. This has happened before. I'm not crazy." There was a pause. She could hear the detective exhale. "Come to the station." Lisa arrived at the police station an hour later, clutching the old case file like it was a lifeline. Detective Harris sat across from her, rubbing his temples. He was an older man, probably only a few years from retirement. She slammed the file onto his desk. "Read it," she demanded. He sighed but picked it up. As his eyes moved across the pages, his expression slowly changed. Lisa leaned forward. "You know something, don't you?" For the first time, Harris looked uneasy. He glanced around, making sure no one else could hear. Then, in a low voice, he spoke. "People disappear in this town, Lisa. They always have. Every 30 to 40 years, someone vanishes without a trace. And before they go," his voice trailed off. Lisa swallowed. "Their voices come back." Harris nodded. Lisa's hands felt ice cold. She had been right. Daniel wasn't the first. And he wouldn't be the last. The detective took out a locked filing cabinet key and retrieved an old folder. He hesitated before handing it to her. Inside were more missing person reports. Some from 1962. Some from 1931. Even one as far back as 1894. All of them identical. People went missing. Families got strange phone calls. And then, those families vanished too. Lisa's stomach twisted. What is happening in this town? Harris leaned back in his chair. His voice was grim. No one knows. And those who try to find out don't last long. Lisa's blood ran cold. Was she next? That night, Lisa sat in her car outside the abandoned house where Daniel had disappeared. Her heart pounded as she stared at the charred remains of the home. She had one chance to get answers. And she knew exactly how to do it. With trembling fingers, she dialed Daniel's number. It shouldn't have worked. His phone was disconnected. But as the line rang, someone answered. Lisa's breath caught. It was Daniel. But his voice was off. Distorted. Warped. Like a bad radio signal. "Lisa." She gripped the steering wheel. "Daniel, where are you?" A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper. "I'm here, but I'm not alone." Lisa's chest tightened. "Who's with you?" The static grew louder. Daniel's breathing became shaky. "Lisa, you have to leave. It knows you're here." Her entire body turned to ice. "What knows I'm here?" Suddenly, the phone cut to silence. And then in the background, a low, guttural voice rumbled through the speaker. "You shouldn't have come back. Lisa." She gripped the steering wheel. Daniel, where are you? A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper. I'm here, but I'm not alone. Lisa's chest tightened. Who's with you? The static grew louder. Daniel's breathing became shaky. Lisa, you have to leave. It knows you're here. Her entire body turned to ice. What knows I'm here? Suddenly, the phone cut to silence. And then, in the background, a low, guttural voice rumbled through the speaker. You shouldn't have come back. Lisa's phone went dead. And then, a shadow moved in the house. Watching. Waiting. Lisa sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, staring at her phone. 1:57 a.m. She hadn't slept in days. Not since the calls started. They always came at the same time, 2 a.m. And every time she answered, it was Daniel's voice. But Daniel was gone. Missing. Presumed dead. Yet, when she picked up the phone, his voice was clear as day. At first, she thought it was a prank. Some sick joke. But the more she listened, the more she knew. It was him. Or at least, something that sounded like him. Lisa rubbed her tired eyes. She had spent hours researching unexplained phone calls, EVP phenomena, and theories on voices from beyond. Some people believed it was just a trick of the brain. Others thought it was something sinister. Lisa didn't know what to believe. But she did know one thing. Tonight, she was going to get answers. The clock struck 2 a.m. Right on time, the screen lit up. Unknown caller. Lisa's pulse hammered. Her finger hovered over the answer button. She took a deep breath and picked up. Silence. For a long moment, there was nothing but static. Then, a voice. Lisa? Her breath caught in her throat. Daniel? The static grew louder. The sound of shaky breathing filled the line. And then, just like before, his voice soft, broken. Why did you stop looking for me? Lisa's chest tightened. Daniel, where are you? The voice hesitated. Then, almost a whisper. Not far. Lisa clenched the phone. I need to know the truth. Tell me, are you alive? The line crackled. Then came a sound, low, distorted, wrong. Like a voice trying to speak through water. You have to leave, Lisa. It's watching you. Lisa's entire body turned cold. What is? She whispered. Daniel's breathing grew frantic. Don't turn around. Her stomach dropped. Every hair on her body stood on end. And then, she heard it. Lisa froze. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to move. Her grip on the phone tightened as her mind raced. She was alone, or at least he had been. Lisa? Daniel's voice was breaking now, like a radio signal fading in and out. Don't let it touch you. Lisa's breath was shallow, her vision blurred. She wanted to turn around, but something in her gut told her. If she did, she wouldn't survive. Her fingers trembled as she slowly reached for the lamp on her nightstand. The room was silent. Too silent. Then, a breath, right against the back of her neck. Cold. Wrong. Not human. Lisa lunged forward, grabbing the lamp and hurling it behind her. Glass shattered. She turned, and for half a second she saw it. A shadow. Tall. Twisted. Its face was wrong, like something trying to wear human skin. And its eyes. Empty. Hollow. It wasn't just watching her. It was waiting. Lisa ran. She grabbed her car keys, bolted down the hallway, and threw open the front door. The night air was freezing. Her feet pounded against the pavement as she sprinted to her car, fumbling to unlock it. Behind her, a sound. Low. Wet. Like something dragging itself forward. She didn't look back. She didn't dare. She jumped into the driver's seat, hands shaking as she turned the key. The engine roared to life. And then, her phone rang. Unknown caller. Lisa's stomach twisted. She knew she shouldn't answer. But something inside her needed to. With a deep breath, she pressed accept. Lisa. Daniel's voice. Barely a whisper now. It's not done with you. Her chest tightened. Tell me what it is. She begged. The line crackled. Daniel's voice was breaking apart, like he was being pulled away. It wears our voices. It follows those who listen. And once you hear it, his voice faded. And then, a new voice. Low. Inhuman. You're next. Lisa screamed. The. She drove all night. Didn't stop. Didn't think. Just kept going. By sunrise, she was miles away. Her phone was dead. But even now, she could still hear it. Somewhere deep in the back of her mind. A whisper. Waiting. What would you do if someone you loved went missing, but you kept hearing their voice? Tell us in the comments. And if this story scared you, wait until you hear the next one. Click here if you dare.